Can you hear us, Mike? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Apparently it's time to do some business. Madam Clerk, whenever you're ready, let's roll us out with a roll call.
Dow,
Here.
Curran.
Here.
Freeling.
Present.
Harrison.
Here.
Hinkleman. Majerick.
Here.
Hot. Pittsburgh.
Here.
Ballraff.
Here.
Warfel. Yarborough.
Present.
Elliott.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 9 present, 3 absent.
Thank you. I knew Alex wouldn't be here for the first part, maybe hopefully by 10:30, and John and Julie are gone today. So we'll do the best we can without them. There's some minutes from way back on the 19th of September. Ma'am,
I will make a motion to accept those minutes.
thank you. Support, moved by Freeling, supported by Pitchford. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Requisition review.
Good morning. Does anybody have any questions about the requisitions? Great, thank you.
Thank you. Is Mike with us?
Yes,
Tom
sir.
Bing? Okay. Morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What's going on up there?
Well, we're in a little bit of a, what I'll call the calm before the storm. The House had their last day of session, or at least presumed last day of session, prior to the November elections last week. The Senate does plan to be in for a couple of days. I think next week they plan to be in just Tuesday. They were in 2 days this week. But we're not seeing a lot of movement on too many things that would be considered controversial, which is not surprising, given the proximity to the November elections as we approach it. Obviously, House members are on the ballot this year, and so they're in Lansing a little bit less and spending a little bit more time in their districts, talking with their constituents ahead of those elections. But we did see some movement last week. Sorry, I got to get my timeline straight here. On the data center legislation. Ultimately, only one of the two data center bills passed the House, and it's currently sitting in the Senate waiting for a concurrence vote. That's the use tax bill. The other bill would exempt sales tax from these large enterprise data centers. I know we've talked about it before, but the hang up here is still sort of a disagreement between two core constituencies in labor and the environmental groups. Two constituencies that I think are very important, particularly to the Democratic Party. And they are still not in agreement on the bills, with organized labor supporting the projects, the environmental community opposed with concerns about water usage, electric usage. And given sort of the proximity to those November elections, they were able to pass the use tax bill with exactly 56 votes, bipartisan, about half the Republicans, half the Democrats voting in favor of that. And then put the sales tax bill on the board, kept the board open for several minutes, but ultimately didn't have the votes to pass that one. We suspect that that will come back up in lame duck and likely will get done before the end of the year. Often we'll see, again, some of these more controversial bills are a tougher vote for certain lawmakers ahead of those November elections. So I do know that there continue to be conversations, I think, in the region about enterprise data centers. I know Northern Indiana, I believe, recently landed one. And so I expect, again, movement on that before the end of the year. Outside of that, I think we're gearing up for that lame duck session, trying to figure out what can get done, what issues will sort of be on that agenda, and where there are things that we support and where there are things that we've got opposition to. So I want to mention just a couple of them, and then I'll take some questions. One that we've talked about a lot is the short-term rental stuff. Representative Andrews has a bill, it's part of a package, although I think the conversation is to sort of skinny that down to just his bill, that would create a short-term rental act that would protect local zoning ability, although it would prevent communities from completely banning short-term rentals. So you'd be able to use zoning, but you wouldn't be able to ban them entirely, and would create a excise tax on those short-term rentals, with a very small portion going to the state to run a registry of where these short-term rentals are and how often they're rented, and the rest of that excise tax being maintained at the local unit. I do want to highlight that I believe, as written, that local unit would be the township or city, not the county, but at least the locals would be receiving some revenue to sort of offset the costs that may come with sort of regulating those short-term rentals. One that we haven't talked about is Senate Bill 663, but it seems to be sort of cropping up a little bit ahead of lame duck. And what it has to do with is allowing Eagle the ability to promulgate some rules within their department, subject to, got to get my stuff out in front of me here, NREPA, and give me a second here, I have that, Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, which is some federal mandates. But ultimately, there is, I think, concern from a number of local governments, drain commissioners and others, on what these rules might be, whether or not it would limit the ability of local units of government to do certain things without Eagle's sort of okay, whether it would slow down processes. I think there's been some concern from the farming or agricultural community as well. The bills have passed the Senate, and the bills themselves sort of allow the department to promulgate rules and go through the traditional rulemaking process subject to that federal act. But but there is concern among lawmakers, and I think maybe just an overall fear of the unknown on what those rules might be, whether they would be overburdensome, whether there would lead to some level of overregulation that would either, harm local businesses or the agricultural community, or just prevent the local units from handling what they normally would handle, again, sort of in that drain commissioner space. As of right now, I think there's enough concern that they're not moving anywhere today, but I put that on the radar because lame duck is an interesting beast, and we never really know what may move and what might not in lame duck. But very interested to hear if there's been any conversation locally on that legislation, if you guys are hearing those concerns or not. And then the last one I'll mention is we are starting to get more conversation on the paid leave, minimum wage, tip credit stuff. As a reminder, the Michigan Supreme Court ruled that the process of adopt and amend, which goes back to 2018, where a legislature can adopt a citizen-initiated law and then immediately amend it, was ruled unconstitutional. So the result of that is that a 2018 ballot initiative shifting to a $15 minimum wage, phasing out the tip credit and sort of moving those tip workers to a minimum wage would go into effect, as well as a paid leave requirement. I'm sure you've been hearing from your restaurant owners and restaurant workers on this. They held a rally. The Save My Tip Coalition of servers and bartenders were here last week, 2 weeks ago, about 300 of them on the Capitol lawn advocating to keep the tip credit. But I do want to put this again top of mind because the county is also an employer, and those paid leave standards require a accrual basis based on the number of hours worked, a minimum number of paid leave to all employees, which includes seasonal employees. I don't know if the county contracts out their lawn mowing or some of those types of things, or if they hire seasonal workers, but that will have sort of a ripple effect if it goes into effect February 21st of 2025. There seems to be more coalescing on doing something in the lame duck session to, we'll say, soften the edges, but we don't know what that solution will look like. If I had to guess, it probably preserves the tip credit in some form, phases in the $15 minimum wage, maybe a little bit more aggressively, a little bit faster to that $15. And then while it preserves, paid leave benefits for everybody, the way that it is accrued or handled by employers might get easier. We may end up in a situation where, if you offer full-time employees, say, 80 hours of paid leave, then you don't have to do the accrual system. Maybe you could front load that annually or something like that. There still is a lot of conversation about sort of seasonal workers, part-time workers, and what those obligations might be. So we are every day having conversations on what that might look like. Why don't I stop there and I can take some questions from folks if they've got them, or again, curious if you guys have heard anything on that Senate Bill 663 locally.
Bob Harrison has a question.
I'm Mike Bob Harrison. I guess last year the legislature passed a law allowing local units of government to go through a process to reduce speed limits on some residential roads. And we're finding, where I live, Lincoln Township is very interested in that. And there seems to be some reluctance on the part of the Michigan State Police to embrace the legislative intent and move forward on implementing this process. So I'm wondering if you've heard anything up in Lansing about where the legislature is, or something out of the Michigan State Police regarding this change.
Yes, let me sort of break it into two parts here. So Obviously, the law which amended, I think PA 33 passed end of last year, maybe. And so with a speed study and noted sort of safety concerns, you can lower down to the 50th percentile instead of the 85th percentile with some sort of resolution locally. Those roads, particularly if you're having problems with Michigan State Police, I would assume is then an M road. Commissioner Harrison, can you let me know which road you're looking at in Lincoln Township?
Oh, there's a group of them. The township is collected roads where they're concerned about the speed limit, and they're pretty much residential roads, so not ones that are under the M designation.
Okay.
So ours, the one I live on is called Ridge Road, and it's a specific segment of that road.
Okay.
Commissioner Harrison, just jumping back to Mike's question, also included from Lincoln Township was concerns about Ridge Road from Glenlord to Marquette, Washington Avenue from Maiden Lane to John Beers, and then Roosevelt Road to its end, which they weren't quite clear,
Yeah.
but just as a follow-up to that question.
Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I guess what I would suggest, and I can have a couple of conversations, but if Brian and county staff are willing, I could organize a meeting here with the legislative liaison for Michigan State Police. I'm sure that there's a sort of a specific division that's handling all of these speed limit stuff. But I find often if we can sit down with the legislative folks, the liaisons for the department, sometimes we can work through some of those concerns or speed up the process. So I guess what I would suggest is that we do that. I will also do some digging around with lawmakers as well, including Representative Slaw, who's from sort of the Zeeland area. He was the sponsor of that legislation, and see if he's hearing similar concerns about those changes or timelines or how fast things are getting shifted. And perhaps it's an issue where we can bring in some lawmakers to improve this process, including the local delegation, to get this done, particularly if there's vast community support for the change.
Great, thank you. That'd be very helpful.
Perfect. I will, Brian, I can connect with you after the meeting, but we can
Yeah.
find time to schedule that meeting.
To the board, this is something that the admin committee has been talking about. Lincoln Township has submitted a resolution asking for 3 roads to be looked at, but we know that we've got similar pressure coming from Chickaming. I think that it's a safe assumption that if we put out a call to all of the supervisors, you'd have a bunch of these coming. The discussion at the admin committee has been essentially, we recognize that it's a new law. We recognize that the state, specifically Michigan State Police, still is the decision maker. But the general guidance from the admin committee was, why don't we test the waters? Bundle up several of these requests, get it in front of the state and see what happens. Over the last week, road staff met with Michigan State Police officials. I participated in that, and I can tell you, just from my opinion, this is one that I would anticipate a little bit of a slow walk from the state police, that this is brand new, and I think they've accepted that there's a new way of setting speeds, but I'm not sure that there's a general sense of this is an improved process over what they've been doing in the past. From my perspective, we've got to make clear to the supervisors that the county is not the final say, that we are not the gatekeepers on this, that we are going to do our best to work with the locals, but they also are going to have to be patient, that it's not the Board of Commissioners, it's not the road department that gets to make this decision. Sorry,
Brian?
that was just a little bit of background.
Brian, can you send me a copy of whatever resolutions you have for those roads, or any background information that you guys have been in process, just so I can get up to speed on it?
Not a problem. And to the other commissioners, Next week, we're working to schedule time with the supervisor from Lincoln Township to just provide additional explanation that it is not the county nor the road department that gets to make this decision. We will do our best to make the case, but we also know that it is a decision that will be finalized by the Michigan State Police. And yes, Mike, I'll send you background.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions for Mike? Yes, ma'am.
What you kept saying lame duck session. My opinion means it's not scheduled. Why might they do it? And may it happen? Does that mean before this session is out?
Yeah, so sorry, I apologize. I should get out of my own lingo here. So the lame duck session is a term that is used to reference the voting that happens after the November elections, but before the end of the year. And the reason it's called a lame duck session is that folks that may have lost their elections, or folks that didn't seek re-election, or who may have been termed out, are still able to vote on legislation with no more elections in front of them. And the newly elected folks, the folks that won those elections in November, don't take office until January. And so there's this period of time in November and December where perhaps the pressure from back home, from voters and constituents, may feel less, or folks that might not be here in January might feel more free to cut a deal and say, I'll vote yes on this, but this is what I really care about. Help me get this done. And so it's a time of sort of greater uncertainty in Lansing. What I will say is, from a calendar perspective, after the election, they've got about the week of the election, that Wednesday, Thursday, and then the following week that they'll likely be in town. And then the legislature will be off for hunting/Thanksgiving break. And then they'll be back in December for, however long they want to stay up until Christmas. And so that is the period of time that we're really talking about when we talk about lame duck.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Another thing, you talked about Eagle and Drain Commission. Is that our Drain Commission?
I have not spoken with the Berrien County Drain Commissioner. I've heard from some folks, and there's a number of state associations that there's some concern. I've had some conversations. I believe some folks in other counties have raised this level of concern. And so if you do talk with your folks locally, whether they're folks at the county or drain commissioners or people in the ag community, I'd be curious if you're hearing any feedback on that Senate Bill 663. And I can send some follow-up information to Brian. He can disseminate as it relates to allowing Eagle to promulgate new rules.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, Mike, thank you for joining us today. Did you have anything else?
I don't think so, but again, if any questions come up after I'm gone, feel free to get them to Brian and send them to me, and we'll make sure we get them answered for you.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Take care.
Public comments. Okay. Given the length of the line, I would say there aren't any. So if you want, we can break early for committees and come back here at 10:30. Yes, ma'am.
I'm so sorry. In reviewing the requisition and some of the change orders, I noticed that there's quite a few for the drain office that exceed what the invoice balance is. And I wondered if we can approve those requisitions, but only for the amount of the invoice, but not the increased amount that is being requested. I did some down and dirty math here, And what's being requested would be needed about 86, almost 87,000. For the invoices presented, what was requested was 183,000. It's a difference of about 96,000. So if we could, since we are in that lame duck session, could we just approve the invoice balance and not the above requested amount?
So I'm gonna ask Annette to chime in with it. Do you have any questions? Is that workable?
It's doable. We're just gonna need to get the actual dollar figure from that office to make sure that we're giving enough to pay the invoices that we have, or that's
Yeah.
what I'm seeing in my head anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I have all of that available to me. That may require some additional work this morning to do that, but certainly we can do that.
Annette, would it be simpler if they approve just a not to exceed amount instead of the change order?
Yeah, I guess I could rewrite just the requisition resolution to say
Essentially,
that.
Commissioner Freeling's rough number was 86. If you approve, say, a not to
90.
exceed 90.
For all of the requisitions that are change order requests.
All the
I think
change
that
orders for the drain
For the
office.
drain office, that would give enough cushion.
It may make it a little simpler.
Okay,
It'll allow upstairs to have a clear enough understanding of that they can
right.
write the amounts, just not to the full change order requested.
And I ask this question not because I want to hold it up, but because I realize that we do have a change coming in that office. And that's a substantial difference in what's being requested versus what's being needed on what was presented for the regs. So,
Had we received any footnote or letter of explanation or any kind of communication about the difference in the numbers?
No, and just as backup on this, so when a change order is requested, the system that we run does allow for the individual requesting the change order to provide essentially footnotes explaining
Mhm.
why the amount is requested and any backup documentation.
Right, that's why I asked. Madam Chair, Finance, what say you?
I think we need an explanation.
Okay,
Otherwise, pay what the bill is, not the overage.
Ray? Anyone else care to chime in? All right, well, my sense is we would approve at least what the balances due would be for each of those invoices. Request additional information as to the 90,000+ beyond payoff on the invoices. And we could always revisit that next week or even at 10:30, depending on how quickly we get that information. Hopefully there's a simple explanation for the extra money. And if need be, we could, like I said, we could keep it on the back burner till next Thursday. Is that an acceptable protocol for everyone? Yeah, okay. All right, let's do that then. We've approved the balances due. And we're awaiting information on the rest and then can review and approve that as appropriate. Is that good for everyone? Who wants to make the motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. And the
I'll
support, moved by Yarborough, supported by Freeling. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion with respect to the requisition review is approved. Yes, ma'am.
I have something, and I'm glad we have the time. It's to me, and it's about DocuSign. That I should review the document and sign it. I've never had anything like that. Do we all have this?
Yeah, can you hand that
Is
to
it,
me?
and that's why I wondered, is it from us? Or am I hacked? Or whatever the word, is that the right word?
You've never received one before?
No,
I mean, I get them from time to time.
never. And it's so,
Yeah, don't sign
because it
this.
says variant.
Yeah.
You know, that's all it says. It doesn't,
But if you
I didn't
click
look
the
at further.
actual sender, it's a firm called techsavvy.ca.
oh Jesus.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna delete this and,
Delete it.
You got it.
I hate this
yeah.
It's
when things like this happen.
CA would be Canada, right?
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh,
Why are they messing with
it's
me?
deleted and your order of maple syrup is gone.
Good, good. That's scary.
Yeah,
Because I
okay.
wanted to get everybody happy.
Yeah, I saw the thing that came through from IS about Wayne County's
Yeah.
server being compromised. So who knows? When in doubt, don't do it. All right,
I don't know where to leave it.
yeah, oh gosh, we had during the campaign, had a Facebook page and someone in our house, not me, clicked on something about updating the password. And then we found out that the website was taken over by someone in Iran. And so it's still there because you can't get a live body at Facebook to talk to you. So it's just gonna sit there, I guess. Anyway, we're adjourned.